We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
Today, we are talking about Chapter 20, The Downside of Creating Good Habits. Jack, what is the summary of this chapter?
I would say summary of this chapter is about mastery. So really the topic that he's talking about, he opens with the example of chess. And he uses an extended example in the middle of the chapter about the Lakers, which is, he talks about their, what does he call it? CBE, their career best efforts. How Pat Riley made them amazing players. I'm sure Weston will have some thoughts on Lakers metrics, but the whole idea is like when we develop good habits, we take our eye off the ball, so to speak. So we miss the forest for the trees, or it's like he uses the analogy of looking in a mirror too closely. You notice little imperfections and not enough places, or standing too far away from the mirror, or not looking at it at all, like not recognizing easily fixable challenges. And so he makes the argument that to master, we need to continually narrow our focus on tiny elements of success. And so kind of one of the things that we were talking about, actually, this is really the thing that you talked about in the last chapter, where you were saying like people need to get comfortable with those marginal gains, those 1% improvements, and they need to get comfortable with that refinement process, right? Like not so much boredom, like it's the pushing past those places. Like you talked about being blindfolded in a maze and pushing through it. I think this is kind of how he talks about doing that. And he gives the example, he suggests a practice, and the practice is reflection. So regular reflection and inventory can help us to take stock or be self-aware enough to continually work on our habits. So Weston, what were your thoughts on this chapter?
So my first note was I learned about the CDE. I'd never heard of that, which was that's honestly, dude. I know you were expecting hate on the Lakers. I loved this.
Yeah. Nice.
I thought that this idea was fascinating, and I would love to quantify something like that for my students, but I don't think I could do it reasonably because, like, I'm sure
I made a note. I imagine you building a spreadsheet like you did for analyzing your Pokemon decks.
You mean like this?
So many spreadsheets. I was actually thinking about showing a spreadsheet I made a couple of years ago where I got too into tracking myself and showing that stuff, because I think after reading this book and thinking about it more, it's like, okay, I stepped away from tracking, but I need to track more, but now I need to refine it and like make it easier to track. Like I might show a quick screenshot here of what my spreadsheet used to look like for my fitness goals and how insane it was looking back on it. Like I cannot believe I did that for as long as I did. But going back to like the CBE and like this idea, I would love to do something like that in my classroom, but I just don't see that I could do it reasonably. I think I would need a team of people watching every student.
Right. Yeah. You need statisticians like they have in the NBA.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay, so, what are the player stats, and let's compile them.
Yeah. And even if I set up cameras, I don't have enough time to review all the tape. Yeah. It's
right.
Like, it's too much for one person to do.
Yeah, totally. I mean that's what's happening. That's what's happening here. I mean I push back extremely hard to this. because I was like, no, this is a terrible example for the average person.
Oh yeah.
To be like analyzing your statistics day by day is not the same as a basketball team with millions of dollars of investment and staff analyzing the stats and progress of teams who are paid millions of dollars to do that, right? Like professional athletes are just, they're fun examples because they're easy to point to and like people love athletes, but they're bad examples for the average person because what people don't realize about professional athletes is they have teams around them supporting these moves.
Yeah.
Right. Like the career best effort is not something where Magic Johnson sat down after the game and he's like, all right, coach, I got my notebook. I wrote down all my stats. Right. It's like, here you go, Mr. Johnson. Here are your stats. And it's like, oh, cool. I hit my CBE.
And
right?
they'll
like,
give him an
so
idea.
different.
They'll be like, we noticed that like this is an area you need to work on. So we're going to have you do this at this time with even like, you know, these 3 guys that can pass you the ball and rebound. So you can constantly take shots instead of like when you go to the park yourself and you take a shot and you're like, I bricked it. And you have to run all the way across the court. It takes 2 minutes to get 5 shots. Like,
yeah, we have these 8 people who are going to spend 40 hours improving your assists this week. Like,
because they're getting paid to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's where I think this falls apart for the average person. And that's where I think you run into some of those issues like we talked about last time of like burnout, over tracking, analysis by paralysis, right? Or paralysis by analysis, right? All things that we've talked about before. I think this can just be exploited to make all of those things bad or worse in your life than what they might already be.
Yeah. Very easy to overdo it in my experience. Very easy. But he does have, I mean, I agree with the graphs on page 241 because it shows those diminishing returns. And like, that's kind of what I wanted to see from this chapter. So I was glad that he talked about those and brought that up.
Yeah. Like that success is not, you've said this many times as we've been talking about this book, that it's not linear.
Yeah.
It has steps and breaks and maybe even a little bit of downward progress, right? Like there are crooked lines to our self-improvement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, because there's sometimes, look, man, there are stubborn people out there, myself included, for sure. I'm sure my wife will cackle at that line, but like there are times when people or me just say, no, I'm going to do it my way. And it's like, you just have to take like 10 to 12 big losses in a row to finally, you know, to humble yourself and be like, okay, what can I actually take away from this? Or maybe I should think about doing this a different way, you know? There are definitely times where we have to take a downward slope to realize that we're not, your way isn't going to work. And that's part of the grind because so many, you know, we, at least me, tend to bash my head against the wall, blind in the maze. And then I'll take a step back and be like, hey, that wall didn't crack, but my face did.
Right. I mean, that's that old saying, right? Like insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Exactly.
Right. Like there's a reason. I love cliches. Cliches are cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. Like they happen in people's lives.
Yeah. I wanted to read the proverb on 249 that he talks about.
Yes. Thank you. My favorite. I love this.
All right. Do you want to read it or do you want me to read it then?
No, read it.
Okay. So this is a proverb from Tao Te Ching. Men are born soft and supple. Dead, they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant. Dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. From Lao Tzu.
Yeah.
And I thought that parable was it was perfect. And it's something that we need to keep in mind in terms of, you know, like we're talking about being brittle, being hard-headed, and not being flexible, you know.
This is so funny. I was reading this chapter and I was out at my parents and I saw my dad, and my dad has been fighting this hip replacement for a long time. He needs it desperately. Like his knee is messed up, his back is messed up, his hip, he's like hobbling and stuff. He's not himself. And like he's adding years to his life, so like that's normal. But he's also, that's not him. Like he's an active guy. If he got this hip replacement, things would change in his life. And he was just sitting, kind of resting. And he was like, I'm moving forward on that hip replacement. I've made these steps to do that. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And he's like, yeah, I've just realized, you just got to listen to people, take good counsel. And I'm old enough in my life now where I realize, I didn't want to do this thing, but I'm just going to do it because it's going to be the best thing for me. And I was like, wow, I was literally just reading this thing about flexibility, and I read it to him, and he was like, yep. Yeah. I'm like, I can, you can look at me. I'm literally getting hard and stiff, like old. And the antidote to that is to remain flexible. And so I was just proud of my dad in that moment, but also I thought it's always cool when you see the direct application of something you've read, and it's like, oh wow, that's exactly like this thing I just read.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I think the thing that I was most proud of there to see was the self-awareness.
Yeah.
The awareness to say, like, I'd been resisting this advice and I've changed my mind because I want to be flexible and I want to make a decision that's going to be best for me and my family, my granddaughter. Like, he was thinking about others and allowing that to bend his own will. Right. I think that's like so often seen as like weakness by the world, right? Like there's so many forces that say like you need to be uncompromising, harsh, inflexible, right? Like ceasingly devoted, right? But like the reality is, like you have talked about so many times if we've gone through this book, life throws curveballs. Like, how are you going to bend to those? And like, are you going to allow for any space for things to change? Like, if I was stubbornly acting the same way I was with my time before my daughter was born, I would have a terrible relationship with my wife and my daughter. If I was managing my time the same way. But I had to just be flexible and say, like, you know what? I'm going to give away some things.
Yeah. Because
life has changed permanently.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it's actually good. And this is a growth direction for my life. It's not a death to be grieved forever. It's just a change. And change is inevitable. So I do like that the book ends on this point. Like the last line of the book, page 249, a lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote. That's a line that I strongly agree with.
I strongly agreed with it too. And I think my pushback here was, why didn't you bring this up earlier?
Yeah.
Like it's like you said, it's literally the last line. And he only talks about this concept. When we talked about it, I think chapter 15 or 16 of going back and like you need to review. It needs to be a loop. You need to and like
we brought that in like a whole episode. We talked about that.
I was just unsatisfied that I was like, okay, I'm glad you mentioned it here, but like this needed to be a bigger part of this, I think.
Well, and how many people will get to this book and they'll read like 5 chapters and never get to these advanced tactics, but especially this last chapter of like the refinement process, the Tao Te Ching, the like flexibility, right? Like how many people will never read this? And so they'll be stubbornly pushing into burnout or, uncomfortable with their marginal gains and give up because they didn't stick through and see like the reflection piece. Like, I think you're right. I think it's an oversight to bring this up so late.
I felt like it should have, I don't know. Again, I didn't write the book, so whatever. But I felt like there could have been a chapter or at least a section of a chapter at the end of each law talking about how do you reflect on this law? How do you reflect on making it satisfying? How do you reflect on making it
obvious,
making
it easy.
Reflect on that. If you can't see it, how do you get better at that? Like, I just think that he could have done a better job bringing this process, this part of the process in more places in the book. I also took notes on the conclusion. Did you?
I did. Yeah, I did too.
It was really short. Okay.
Well, and thinking about that for our listeners, anybody who is interested in actually reflecting on this stuff and making improvements, I found the graph on page 253 in the conclusion to be a very helpful thing that you could use for reflection. Like, there's all these complicated charts and stuff on the website, but I really think that this thing here where it says like behaviors are effortless here and behaviors are difficult here,
Yep.
having that scale from obvious to invisible, attractive to unattractive, easy to hard, satisfying to unsatisfying, and charting your life or your habits on those scales could be really helpful for thinking about, I often bring up the example of smoking because I feel like it's a habit that is easy to point to. But it's like, if you want to be a smoker, where does it fall on this scale? And like, how can you move it to the place where you want it to be?
Yep. And yeah, I totally agree. I think looking at that more would have been nice rather than just put it at the very end of the conclusion.
Yeah.
And yeah. I wanted to briefly mention the Greek parable that he brings up too on page 251, because I think that speaks a lot to what you spoke about last chapter in terms of greed and
Oh yeah.
Everyone wanting more and needing to be okay with less, needing to be content with less, or at least not the best, right? There's only one best, and there's freaking 8 billion people.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, and the parable is the Sorites or Sorites. Sorites, I'm not sure. Paradox, which just talks about, like, okay, well, you're not rich if you have one coin, but are you rich if you have like 100 coins? If they're not rich, are you rich when you have 1,000 coins?
Yeah.
And like, at what point are you considered rich and not rich? Like, there has to be one coin delineation. There has to be some point where
at which you are
rich.
Yeah, right.
Not rich.
Is it 1,000 or is it 1,001?
Yeah.
Is it 1,002, 1,003? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the summary statement, he says there is the holy grail of habit change is not a single 1% improvement, but 1,000 of them. Yeah, what were your thoughts on that?
I thought it was good. I thought it was a good parable and something to remember. And again, I don't know if I took the same lesson that he wanted to get across.
Oh, okay.
I took it as I need to not be obsessed with the next coin. And I think he was trying to get across the point that
be obsessed with
the next little coin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, I think I took the opposite lesson.
I learned the wrong thing here.
Yeah, like we talked about previously.
Yeah. Somehow I've learned the wrong thing.
Did I learn the wrong thing, or did he teach the wrong thing?
Interesting.
Yeah. Like we talked about with greed. Like but again, we've mentioned this. This book is very much like business focused and like achievement focused. And so I just have a lot of issues with that kind of mindset in general. So of course I'm going to have.
And there's something to keep in mind with this book too, is that it's not an academic book. It's written for mass market.
Yeah.
So there may have been topics that Clear wanted to address in this book that his editor said, nah, man,
exactly.
You can't be a New York Times bestseller and go on and on about this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point too. That it might have, some things that I griped about might have been edited out.
Yeah.
So in fairness to Clear, I'm sure there was a lot that he would have to respond to me with this book about.
Yeah, well, and it's clearly working for him, right?
Yeah.
This process is clearly working. Like we've talked about the elite like place that he has found himself in after telling us at the beginning of the book that he really is like nobody of consequence, right? Like he's just a kid who played like sort of like high level baseball and went to college and like started studying habits and has found himself in a wildly successful place. So the proof is in the pudding to some respect, where we should look at him and say like, okay, well, his habits have led him to a place where New York Times bestselling author, many published blogs.
Like I said last episode, like I think there's so many good ideas in this book. I just wanted them more fleshed out. Yeah. I think so. What are your thoughts? Maybe this is where we can end with the reflection piece of this chapter. If you are going to reflect, how should you do it? Like he gives these
3 questions. What went well this year? What didn't go well this year? What did I learn? This is on page 246. Mm-hmm. And he says his integrity report answers 3 questions. What are the core values that drive my life and work? How am I living and working with integrity right now? How can I set a higher standard in the future? My question, as you look at those kind of things, like what are the questions you would ask as you're reflecting? In moments of reflection, what would you do? Do you think these are good, or would you ask different questions of yourself?
So what I wrote is like, I do want to try this idea of doing maybe at least biannual, you know? And like I said, I've stepped away from tracking a lot in the last few years. And I think I need to jump back in, but I need to do it in a better way. Like, I think I should just track my meals more of like a checklist, like the habit checklist here, where it's just like, did I get, you know, a healthy meal? Because at this point with my meal prep and after years of doing it, like I have a good menu, I have options. I set myself up for success pretty well, but I don't always meet that success. Because one of my stress responses is to just be like, the system, even if I made the system. And I don't know why I do that.
Why am I the man? I'm going to resist me.
Yeah, right? Yeah, dude, I do that to myself, and I don't know why. But that's something. So I think I should at least use the habit checklist and put, you know, meals, workouts, and then things like how many times did I journal this week? Or, you know, I was even thinking about doing something like video games I've completed, books I've completed, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what I want to do. Maybe set up something like that where I have like maybe 3 to 4 goals that I'm tracking consistently so I can look at it and be like, okay, in this first half of the year, this is how many times or a percentage of time I was successful with this goal, percentage of time I was successful with this goal. Because I was already trying to think, well, it's like, okay, if I go meals, I normally eat 20 meals a week. So I need to like make my percentage out of that. Whereas workouts, I could do 6 or I could do 12 if I count my lifting and my cardio. So like it depends on how much I want to break it down. So yeah, I've just been kind of wrapping my head around, okay, what do I actually want this to look like where it's refined enough?
That's something that's been hard for me. I think from this whole book, I'm taking something very simply. I do this reflection regularly with my wife on our anniversary and mid-anniversary. So like we usually find time to get away at both of those junctures together intentionally. And we ask 3 questions. What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we start doing? Or what do we want to keep doing? What do we want to stop doing? And what do we want to start doing? And it's always a fun conversation because like we have different ways of approaching that and different ideas. And like they don't always have to do with our marriage. They might be like personal. Might be like, I want to keep doing this because I feel like that's working really well. Or I feel like I'm just getting somewhere with that. And that's been a really helpful reflective exercise. For me, I want to add just one maybe simple thing from Clear, which is like, where are my opportunities for 1% gain? What are the improvements I can make in my life? Yeah. And where are the areas I'm at risk of 1% loss? Just that simple question and apply some of these habit metrics around those things. Maybe some of these other practices, depending on the severity, like might implement habit stacking or think about like, I'm at danger of 1% loss here. Maybe I need the 2-minute rule. I just need to like figure out what that looks like for this thing.
Yeah.
But that's all I think I'm going to add from Atomic Habits, but I'm eager to try it and see what that will look like in larger reflection.
Yeah. I really like that idea with your wife. I think I'm going to steal that.
Yeah. That's cool. Keep doing, stop doing, start doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun because it acknowledges what you're doing, but also gives you that opportunity to improve. Like what do we need to stop doing? Like,
opens up the opportunity for my wife to be like, I want you to stop doing this.
Yeah. I have many things that I would like you to stop doing.
Yeah. Right.
No, it's best when it's couched in a team set. That's why we do it at anniversaries. We don't do it weekly, or like, day to day. We do it on moments when we know like, okay, we're together on this. Like, let's talk about this. Have fun with it.
I'm also excited because I feel like I'll finally have time to start to set some of these things up
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Summer.
yeah, with school ending here in a few days, like, yeah, it has been this year has been excruciating for teachers. So if you know one, give them a hug.
Yeah. Hug your teacher. Review your habits.
Yeah.
Get atomic.
Get atomic.
Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.